The saloon doors swung in the wind like loose shutters, creaking against the dusty silence of the frontier evening. A storm was rolling in across the prairie, the kind that carried dust thick as smoke and thunder that could make horses rear. Inside the dim barn at the edge of the ranch, a single lantern cast flickering light across the walls, catching the tremor in her hands as she held out the torn piece of cloth. Her eyes were wide, glistening with a mix of fear and desperation. I took it off. "Please!" she cried, her voice breaking like a fragile branch in the wind. The rancher froze where he stood, hat still in hand, boots heavy with mud. He stared at her, the outlaw's brand she'd ripped from her dress, and something in his chest shifted. Slowly, deliberately, he made his move. "Before we go deeper, if you believe in kindness, redemption, and stories that touch the soul, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to The Gentle Truth. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive and spreading hope." Her name was Eliza May Turner, a young woman who had grown up in a small frontier town where every whisper traveled faster than the wind. She'd been raised in the shadow of her father's debts owed to a ruthless outlaw gang that controlled the nearby hills. When she turned 17, her father, desperate and broken, gave her away to the gang's leader as payment. From that day, she became known not as Eliza May, but as the Branded Girl, forced to wear a red cloth stitched with the gang's mark on her dress, a symbol that told every rancher and townsman to stay away. She was theirs. For years, she lived under their watchful eyes, doing chores, cooking, and hiding bruises under long sleeves. The outlaw leader had promised her father she'd be safe, but safety under his hand meant obedience and silence. She learned to keep her head down and her voice quieter than a whisper, but something inside her never fully broke. Every night, she'd stare at the stars and imagine running, riding into the open plains until their mark was nothing but a distant shadow. One night, after overhearing the gang's plan to raid a ranch at dawn, a ranch owned by a man they feared but envied, she made her choice. She waited until the campfire burned low, grabbed a knife, and cut the red cloth from her dress. She pressed it against her chest, trembling. It wasn't just fabric. It was years of fear, shame, and forced silence. And then, before dawn, she ran. The storm hit as she reached the outskirts of the Hale Ranch. Thomas Hale, the rancher, was a quiet, solitary man who'd built his land from nothing. Years earlier, outlaws had taken everything from him: his livestock, his younger brother, and his trust in strangers. He lived with his horses, his work, and his ghosts, speaking little to anyone. But when he found her collapsed by the barn fence, soaked and shivering, clutching that red cloth, something old and fierce stirred in him. She begged him to help her. She told him she had taken it off, that she wasn't one of them anymore. Her voice cracked with fear that he might turn her away, thinking she was bait for a trap. He froze at first, memories of past raids tightening his jaw. But when he looked into her eyes, he saw not a spy or a trick, but a young woman carrying the weight of years she never chose. Slowly, he extended his hand and led her inside. That night, she sat by the fire wrapped in one of his blankets. The barn smelled of hay and horses, the wind howling through the cracks as if trying to claw her back outside. She told him everything: the gang, the brand, the plan to attack his ranch at sunrise. Her hands shook as she spoke, but she didn't hold anything back. He listened silently, the way only someone who has known pain can. By the time she finished, the sky was still dark, but a decision had already formed in his mind. Thomas had spent years living like a ghost, avoiding fights, avoiding people. But this was his land, his family's land. He'd lost too much already, and he wouldn't lose again. He told her to rest, then saddled his horse, gathering his small band of ranch hands. As the first light crept over the horizon, they set up defenses. He didn't send her away. Instead, he gave her a place in the barn loft with a rifle, a sign of trust she hadn't expected. When the outlaws arrived, the storm was still hanging low over the plains, the air heavy with tension. They rode in with guns and torches, expecting to catch the ranch sleeping. But Thomas and his men were ready. The shootout that followed was fierce and loud, echoing across the open land like thunder. Eliza, shaking but determined, spotted the gang leader trying to flank through the barn. She raised the rifle, breath uneven, heart pounding. For years, she had been the one cowering in corners while others decided her fate. This time, she pulled the trigger. The shot rang true, wounding him and giving Thomas the opening he needed to drive the rest away. When it was over, the ranch was scarred but standing. The gang was broken. The lawmen, who had long hesitated to confront the outlaws, finally rode in to arrest the wounded and scattered survivors. Eliza stood in the doorway of the barn, the red cloth still in her hand, but now it was nothing more than a scrap. She looked at Thomas, her eyes brimming not with fear, but something she hadn't felt in years: hope. He walked toward her slowly, the storm finally clearing behind him, sunlight cutting through the clouds. He didn't say much, but his gesture was enough. He offered her work on the ranch, a place to stay if she wanted. She accepted, not as a branded girl, but as Eliza May Turner, a woman reclaiming her name and her future. Over time, she learned to ride freely across the fields, to laugh again, to work side by side with people who saw her for who she was, not what she'd been forced to wear. The red cloth, once a symbol of fear, was buried under the oak tree by the barn, a quiet grave for her past. Thomas, too, found something unexpected in her presence. The ghosts that had haunted his ranch grew quieter, replaced by the sound of shared work, shared meals, and the slow, steady warmth of trust returning. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Gentle Truth. Your support helps us bring more emotional, powerful Wild West stories to life. Before we end, we'd love to hear from you. Comment below with the moment in this story that moved you the most. Your words keep our storytelling community alive. In the end, her plea, "I took it off, please," was more than a cry for help. It was the beginning of a new life. She shed the symbol of her chains, and a hardened rancher found a reason to fight again. Under the wide, wild sky, two broken souls began to rebuild, not as strangers bound by fear, but as survivors bound by courage.